In the latter part of 2012, the Office of Image Archaeology made a purchase of several reels of 16mm film. Later, as time permitted, most of that film was displayed on the internet with links through the Office of Image Archaeology. One of these films contained Korean War era footage of a Navy Martin PBM-5 aircraft. Now jumping forward to October of 2014, Wayne Bancroft lives in a Chicago, Illinois suburb and is searching the internet for material relating to a project that he has been working on. He chooses to search one of the more popular video sites. As that web page opens up, there is a list of suggested videos based on past searches. One of the suggested titles in Wayne Bancroft's search that day is that of a Navy Martin flying boat that had been exhibited in early 2013. The film's title having to do with the Korean War era Martin aircraft caught his eye, so he chose it and he began watching. At a point almost 6 minutes into the film, several naval officers in their dress whites are milling around celebrating what appears to be a graduation. The mood is jovial and the men are smiling and joking with one another. A few are even taking photographs and using movie cameras. One of these is shooting the very film Wayne would find in 2014. As this person catches the attention of one particular officer, the gentleman turns and we see a handsome man with a kind, friendly smile. At that point he stops the film. Wayne has just seen something he believes to be impossible. Quickly he rewinds the last few seconds and watches again, and then once again to be sure. And as the man turns, Wayne is sure. Incredibly, looking back at Wayne through a veil of time, 62 years never having seen his smile, here was one meant just for him. Wayne's father, Lieutenant J.G. Wayne Eugene Bancroft Sr., turned and smiled at Wayne for the first time in Wayne's life. As a child growing up, Wayne had seen the black and white photographs and heard the stories his mother and other family members would tell him about his father, but had never seen him in person. Wayne's father, as part of Patrol Squadron VP-47, was a co-pilot on a Martin PBM aircraft much like the one in the video. Sadly, he and most of his fellow crew members would perish in a fiery crash on December 26, 1952, while on submarine patrol over the Sea of Japan. Wayne Eugene Bancroft Jr., now 61 years old, was born just 4 months later on April 3, 1953. Growing up, he would never see his father in color, see him move, or bask in the warmth of his friendly, open smile. After discovering the film containing the clip of his father, Wayne, with some help from OIA, began researching everything he could about the fatal 1952 crash and the people involved. That research would eventually find Joseph and Beverly Smith living in California, and as it turned out, not too far from the home of the Office of Image Archaeology. Fate would have it that Joseph Smith was sitting next to Lieutenant Bancroft at the time of the crash. Smith survived the crash, and Bancroft, just inches away, did not. In early 2015, Wayne Bancroft, his son Luke, and George Myhall would meet with Joseph Smith and his wife Beverly at their home in California. The following video is a product of that meeting. My mother gave me my father's briefcase 20-plus years ago. I opened it for the first time a little over 5 years ago. I remember the sorrow I felt while reading the documents, the sorrow of not having him there to love and teach me. It opened up a hole in me that had for so long been sealed. I am trying with little success to fight the emotions calling for me to break down in tears of loss and suffocating sorrow. I feel no shame in this, even as a young man. There was a very strong connection to my father. Not since childhood have I felt so strong the loss of a father unfairly taken before I was born.
Last year, around October timeframe, I was watching YouTube. I was on a totally different topic, and YouTube has puts a list of suggested videos on the side. And on the side list of the suggested videos came this video that was labeled Navy Martin, and you know. I actually thought I wasn't going to have any emotion because I've gone through this so much, you know. Coming up here, I felt like I was, you know, I felt like this is, I washed all the tears out,
Yeah.
but they're still there.
Doesn't always work.
So anyhow, then my father came towards the end of the video. It was an officer's, it looked like an officer's graduation party or some kind of party that the officers were having. And my father was the first one, he's in the first 2 seconds of that part of the film, and then he shows up later at the end. Just a small little clip. And, you know, he's standing sideways, and then he turns and he looks. I've never seen a video of my father, but I knew it was him.
Oh, well that was...
Yeah, you know. So I called my two sons out, and I had the video on the, I had the clip of the video on the TV screen. I asked them to come in. I wanted verification. I knew it was him. I didn't need verification, but I'm starting to feel better. I knew it was him, and but I wanted verification, not that I needed it. And this is the picture that was on the video that I froze, and I have this picture on my desk on the wall, right above there. I had it there. You know, I didn't put it there. It was there. I've had other things there too, but at this time this was there. And so I called Luke in. I called my other son Alex in, and I asked them, I asked them for verification. They looked at it and said, "Yeah, that's your dad." They both instantly said it.
Let's see. Yeah.
And here's a picture of my. Oh, this is for you, by the way. I put this together for you, but.
Oh.
Let me. And that's my dad.
Oh, fantastic.
That's my dad.
Yeah.
So, and as a kid, I always felt like I knew my dad, and I'm sure some of this, I felt, I probably don't know, I probably have some misconceptions what he was like, but I think I pretty much have an idea what he's like. But then for a second more verification, I put a picture of my mother and my father that I had next to him. I just wanted two pictures next side by side, so you could just see it, and that you could just see that's him.
That's for sure.
And and then 14 years earlier, Barbara Hedrick, I'm saying her last name right. I'm sorry. Hedrick. Her and her sisters, I guess they found some. They were involved with the military is doing the the Department of the Navy has a missing persons section, and their job is to try and recover bodies, and if they do recover bodies, they want DNA. So they reached out to the families to get DNA samples. Well, you need maternal, not paternal DNA. So there's nothing on my father's side. There was nothing, we couldn't give any DNA, but they did, and they received some information about the crash that they never knew before, and they wanted to reach the other families of the crew. And so they asked if they can, for the names of the addresses of the family they can write to. And the Navy wouldn't allow that, but they did it indirectly. So the Department of the Navy took their letter and sent it to us. And so I don't know where the story starts. It starts 60-some years ago.
Yeah, for sure. Well, what did the Navy say regarding the recovery and so forth?
Well, I don't think they know where the plane is, but I don't think they'll ever recover it. And, you know, if it brings closure to families, you know, to have the bodies recovered, I think it's worth it. But, you know, for me...
Well, you probably have about the same letter I have. I made an inquiry into that also, and the Navy sent back and said they didn't recover it, they considered it.
From Flight Engineer Petty Officer 3rd Class Joseph Smith. Early Sunday morning, November 23, 1952, 14 men would leave the Alameda Naval Air Station at Alameda, California, aboard boat number 12 of Patrol Squadron VP-47. This was the beginning of what would be the 3rd Korean combat tour for Patrol Squadron VP-47. Their final destination would have them arriving on November 29, 1952, at Yokosuka, Japan. We were a fairly new crew, as some had been with us only a month or so before leaving the States. Also, some on board were not part of our normal 10-man crew, i.e. Bud Mounts, weathermen for the flight. My job was centered around the plane captain, the pilot, co-pilot, navigator, and radio man, mostly on the flight deck. The following is about what I know about the crew I worked with. Our pilot was Lieutenant Dale Anderson, a good experienced pilot called back to duty from the United States Naval Reserves. He was easy to work with. Beverly and I met his wife at a going-away party. She was very gracious, to the extent that she actually called Bev after the crash to tell her that she was so happy that I had survived. She did this even while mourning the death of her own husband. This photograph of Lieutenant Dale Anderson was provided by his nieces Maya and Deborah Anderson and was used in a World War II naval recruiting poster with Lieutenant Dale Anderson on the left and his twin brother Donald on the right. The Andersons hailed from Corpus Christi, Texas. Our co-pilot was Lieutenant J.G. Wayne Eugene Bancroft. He was a very good man, a regular guy. He was easy to get along with, and I liked him a lot. Wayne had just been relieved at the co-pilot seat and was standing next to me at the navigator table when we crashed, and I never saw him again after that. The chief ordnance man aboard the boat was Petty Officer 3rd Class Clinton Duke Macklin. Duke would mend any gun when needed. Jammed guns, ammunition supply, and other weapon malfunction were his responsibilities. A job he loved was cooking for the crew on long flights. Not sure where he was when we hit, but probably helping jettison guns and the like after the pilot directed me to have the crew jettison. The second gunner was Petty Officer 3rd Class Robert Wendell Stapleton. Stapleton was my backup flight engineer. He normally manned the port-aft machine gun. He was one of the survivors, and I believe he said that's where he was when the accident happened. Flight navigator Ensign Donald McKinney also survived the crash. He was normally stationed next to the flight panel at the navigator table where Lieutenant Bancroft was standing at the time of the crash. McKinney was in the co-pilot seat at the time of the accident, and I imagine he escaped through the top hatch over his head. There are reports that he washed up on the Renshaw and hit his head there. Those were untrue. He was rescued by brave men in the whaleboat with several deep lacerations to his head, among other things. Airman Fred Lynch was another ordnanceman and was one of our newest crew members. Fred was from Fowler, California, a small town just south of Fresno. His story, along with mine, were covered in the Fresno Bee newspaper. Bev knew Fred's fiancée, as she went to the same high school with us. Bev and my parents all went to Fred's memorial service. George Haig was an aviation machinist mate, petty officer first class. He was also our plane captain. He was responsible for the enlisted crew aboard and their duties. George was my mentor as far as my flight training goes. He was an excellent plane captain, and he knew the various duties of all the crew. When our port engine failed, he came immediately to the flight deck, and the two of us tried to analyze exactly what was happening. After all attempts failed, he ran back to the aft station to prepare for the crash. He could have sent me back to help the crew, but instead left me at the panel, and he went back. Had he sent me back, it would probably be him telling this story instead of me. Max Stutter was the electronics technician aboard and shared radio and electronics duties with first radio man Robert Newman and John James. Max Stutter and I met from time to time as we both worked for the California Division of Highways, and our paths would cross occasionally. We also corresponded over the years, the last time being in 1999. Also aboard that day was the aerographer and weatherman Petty Officer Second Class Rufus Lloyd Mounts. Petty Officer Mounts would accompany whatever flight that happened to be making a run north from Korea to Siberia to observe the weather conditions that might affect current military operations in the region. The following information was obtained at the time of this production from Mounts' sister Barbara Hedrick. According to Mrs. Hedrick, the young man preferred being called Bud. Barbara explained that he really did not like being called Rufus, and in one of his letters home he asked his mother, "Who named me Rufus anyway?" By all accounts, the young man was very smart, and he had the handsome face one would expect to see starring in a Hollywood production. Bud would send many letters home to his family while in the service, and two common requests from the young man were for cigarettes and to know how much money he had in his bank account. December 21st, 1952, Bud's mama, Edna Mounts, would write the last letter she would ever send to her son. In it, she makes mention of the December 20th, 1952 Moses Lake, Washington crash, a C-124 plane crash in which 87 soldiers would die. She says how relieved she was that he was not in that plane crash. This was just 6 days before her son could read that letter, as he would perish in another military plane crash half a world away. Her last letter to her son was returned unopened. I really don't know a lot about the rest of the crew. We were all trained to man the machine guns, including me, so most were always at machine gun station or off somewhere else during the long flights, and I never really had a chance to know them very well. Also, during these flights, I never left the engineers panel, and they seldom came up to the flight deck.
Anyway, I joined the Navy right out of high school. I was 17, and I joined for the one reason that if you joined before your 18th birthday, you'd get out on your 21st birthday, which was 3 years instead of the 4 years. And I was anxious to go in and get out and start my own life. So graduated in 1952 in July and in June and joined the Navy in July.
So you were only 17 when this?
Yeah, I was almost 18.
Oh,
but,
okay.
Yeah, and went through boot camp in San Diego, Naval Air Station in Florida, Jacksonville, Florida, and then to Memphis. Came home, got married to my childhood sweetheart, who'd been going steady ever since the 10th grade.
Wow.
And we got married in July. I was in VP-47, trained as a flight engineer on Baker April 12th. And we were supposed to go overseas in September. We didn't get there until November due to operational problems and a lot of other things. But anyway, we flew. I remember having bologna sandwiches over from Johnston Island on my way to Iwakuni on Christmas Day, or Thanksgiving Day. At any rate, the squadron transpacked to Iwakuni, Japan. It was a 5-day transpack, and our mission was to fly out of Iwakuni. Sometimes we were in the China Sea on the west side of Korea, and other times we were flying up on the Sea of Japan off of Korea with Task Force 77. which the PBMs were seaplanes, patrol planes, and they were, we carried sonobuoys, which we dropped to listen for submarines, was our basic.
So you dropped microphones into the...
Yeah, that's basically what
Okay.
it was. And that's what we were doing, I'll go back, that's what we were doing, and then we would go on up into Siberia, take weather reconnaissance notes, and then come fly back. And then, you know, PBM, we were flying 12 to 13-hour flights.
Or were you strictly submarines looking for U-boats?
We were with the task force. When we were on the other side of Korea, we were up near China, and we were taking pictures of boats and things of that nature. We would get down almost on the water with the seaplane and take photographs.
Out of map here.
So yeah, so we were over here on this side, but then where we were was on this side, the night of the 26th. Anyway, that night we were flying. The pilot was Lieutenant Dale Anderson. The co-pilot was Wayne Bancroft, Lieutenant J.G., and the navigator and also pilot was Donald McKinney. And we were flying a night flight intended to go with Task Force 77, then go on up to Siberia for our weather reconnaissance. So we had a couple extra people aboard. We had an observer aboard and a meteorologist aboard. That's where your friend Kendricks came in. But we left, it was a dark and stormy night, I think we can say that. We were on mission of about 2.5 hours or so. We were up around the task force, and we were getting ready to drop sonobuoys and so forth. So we were down at about 1,500 feet, flying at night. This was the 26th of December. It was Christmas night here in the States, and the day after Christmas there in Korea. We had some problems. We had some electrical problems all through the flight, and we finally lost one of our generators. And this was kind of important to our plan because it was mostly electric. Even the props were Curtis Electric props, which we can control the pitch of the propeller and so forth. So the electrical problems were pretty serious, but we had both good engines, and then only one generator was working, but we had auxiliary generators, which we tried to get to work. I was at the flight panel. Lieutenant Bancroft had just left the pilot seat, the co-pilot seat. Your dad went over and he was standing close to me at the navigator
This is
seat.
one that they were having electric problems?
Yeah, we were having some problems at that time, but I'm not sure why he changed seats with Ensign McKinney, but Ensign McKinney was sitting in the co-pilot seat at this time, and your dad was close to me at the navigator table. We lost all of the power, most of the power in our port engine. And in this situation, fully loaded with bombs and sonobuoys and a full crew and so forth, at 1,500 feet, we just don't have a chance to recover. That's all there is to it. The plane, once we lost the one engine, I couldn't get it going.
Well, you had power in the engines before, but you said you had both engines running and the electricity first went out?
Yeah, everything was working fine. These things happen after you get going. The port engine is the one that gave us the problem, and it never really stopped. But we lost the power in it. The RPMs went way down. We couldn't get it up, and so the starboard engine was trying to keep us in the air. We had, for your information, before flown on one engine, we lost an engine out of Alameda a few months before that, and we were about 10,000 feet, and we were able to jettison everything and get the plane back up to altitude to get over the Bay Bridge and get landed again. We've gone down to
the same plane number?
yeah, same plane, different problem, nothing to do with this problem. But the planes would fly on that engine if you had enough altitude to begin with.
Yeah.
But we didn't have the altitude that night, and of course it was dark, it was stormy, and very cold. So the pilot ordered me to, the flight engineer was essential communications for the rest of the crew, and he ordered me to tell crew to start. Well, first of all, he said, start jettisoning everything. And then we realized it was just too late for that, and he ordered to prepare for crash. And that was right before we didn't have the time, really.
Was anybody sleeping at it?
Probably so, because we, like the weather reconnaissance people and even our ordnance men and a lot of them, they could get some sleep because this was, well, it was a night flight for one thing, but it was, 12, 13-hour flight, and some of us didn't want to quit, and we stayed at our stations, but a lot of the crew was able to sleep. We had bunks in the back, and they had galley, and of course on the PBM, we had one of our ordnance men, Duke Macklin, was our chef, and he cooked some pretty good meals and things on this plane on this 13 hours. But at any rate, when we lost the engine and we were going down, prepared to crash, we hit the water really hard, but we bounced, and it was kind of a odd feeling. The engines were screaming, we had them wide open.
The plane didn't right away.
No, we hit, because we were coming down really fast.
Yeah.
And we hit, but then we bounced, and it just kind of hung there, and then we hit on crashed into a wave.
How big were the waves?
They were 15 to 20 feet.
And how cold was the water?
Well, there's a lot of different stories about it, but it was about 32 degrees, at least with the official.
32 degrees,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
So it was almost freezing.
Yeah, and so was the weather, it was
Yeah.
about the same. So we hit the second time, and plane...
This was at 9:15, was it?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And the plane broke apart and exploded, and the fire came out all over.
You were next to my father.
Yes, yeah, yeah. I never saw him after that. Of course, it was dark, and we were losing power in the plane, of course, and we had, the lights weren't very good in there. We had very few lights left. I never saw your father again.
How did you get out of it?
Well, the second time we hit, when the plane broke apart, the only thing I remember is the panel, the flight panel with all the instruments and everything came in on me, and the water came over the top.
Can you show me this drawing?
Let's see, I think this is the pilot, and then this is the flight panel here, and this is the navigator table right here.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's no way out in this area at all.
Okay.
There's the after hatch here, and then the hatches up
My
here.
father lived right here?
Yeah.
And you're,
I was right here at the panel. This is the panel here.
so you're on the same side as my father?
Yeah. We were on the same flight deck right together there. So,
And the pilots are here and the gunners are down here.
yeah, well, yeah, we didn't have our turrets manned at the time, so they were probably, these are the bunks back in here. And so some of them were probably sleeping. Anyway, yeah, this panel here caved in on me, and that's what I saw. There's all the water coming over, and I was underwater.
This panel, so you got out through the top or through?
I don't know how I got out. I was underwater.
It just happened fast.
And I remember trying to, I had, contrary to some of the reports, we had heavy wool, or not wool, but fur flight jackets and flight suits that cover the whole body. The whole suit was made like this, with the fur inside and everything. This happens to be the top part that goes on, and the other covered everything but your boots and your socks. And I lost my shoes in the crash, but then I was able to get rid of the rest of the flight suit, except for this, because this was still around my shoulder. It wasn't over my head, but it was still there. So that's how I ended up with it.
And which part of it was burned?
Well, it used to be, I don't know if I cleaned this thing up or not. I guess I cleaned it up a little bit. And most of it was burned around here. And,
That looks burned, yeah.
But first thing I was trying to do was get that off. I was underwater, and it, you know, it's just like wader boots or something to fill you up and take you down the river.
Yeah.
And I got that off, and then got my life jacket back on. This is, as I remember, all under the water, and of course. But I got my life vest around my arm, and next thing I knew, I bobbed up to the top. And then it came right up in the midst of all the flames, and we had training about, you know, splashing and getting rid of the fire and things, and yeah, the flames were all low. It just spread over everything. I was burned some, nothing serious. When I was in the water, and there was a lot of fire, and we heard, I heard people yelling. I never saw anybody. It was dark up except for the flames that were right directly around everyone.
Yeah.
And so, a long story short, I spent 40 minutes in the water, going mostly underwater, coming up for breaths, hanging on to my one life jacket, until I saw a light. And I heard some other people yelling that there they are, or something. And that's the last thing I remember. I woke up the next morning. Well, I saw the light, and then I went unconscious and woke up in sickbay the next morning. They were still beating me and rubbing me and trying to get circulation back. They said it was about 12-minute water, actually. We were in there for 40 minutes, so pretty cold. And at that time, they told me that there were 3 other survivors and no other survivors. I didn't know who at that time. Well, there was a story. Well, I wrote my wife, Beverly, the story about how they told me I was lassoed and brought aboard the ship. And that was the story that I had been told, and that's what I believed for 60 years. Kind of a hard story to believe, because those ships were practically underwater themselves out there in those swells. That's the way they are. And anyway, I got a call from a couple of people one day. My wife and I were having coffee in the backyard. And, well, this one fellow called and said that I've got 2 sailors that wanted to talk to you if you're the Joseph Smith that was rescued by the USS Renshaw in '52. And I said, yeah, I'll talk to you. He said they were aboard the whaleboat. And I said, well, that's fine, we'll talk to them.
Renshaw's a whaleboat?
It had a whaleboat.
Okay.
I didn't know it at the time.
So they launched the...
yeah, and so I wondered at the time, well, I don't know anything about this whaleboat. So I got in touch or they got in touch with me, one of them from South Carolina, Ken Walden, and then Ron Tolgren. They're hard names to keep apart. They were both aboard this whaleboat. And the story comes out that the whaleboat, they had 7 volunteers that volunteered to go overboard in the whaleboat and try to pick us up. And there was a lieutenant or an ensign in charge of the whaleboat, and it's quite a story about him. He jumped overboard and swam out and pulled the people. They jumped overboard from the whaleboat and pulled the people back to the boat, and then they tied ropes on us and pulled us into the whaleboat in these 20-foot waves and so forth.
He had a rope on him when he jumped out?
Yeah, and he had a rope on him. So that was a story that I had never heard before. Lieutenant St. Lawrence, Ensign St. Lawrence at the time.
So he's very... Yeah.
Right. And he ended up with a medal, Bronze Star, and the other 6 members of the whaleboat all got commendations from the Admiral and so forth for their heroics. They were the true heroes of the whole thing. But as I said, this is a story that I'd never heard before for 60 years. Year before last year ago September, I was invited to the USS Renshaw reunion. It was in San Diego. And so I said, yeah, if I go though, I'd like to at least acknowledge the people and what they did for me and the other three. And so we went to San Diego and had a very nice meeting with all these guys. And there was about five people from the Renshaw there that were on the ship that night. And I gave a speech about it because I try to keep this story's about them, not about me.
Well,
And,
it's about the war,
yeah,
you know.
yeah.
I mentioned the lieutenant that was going to get the court-martial.
Well, yeah, they.
Court-martial?
Well, the lieutenant dropped. He jumped overboard. And went out, as I said, and pulled us in. And he came close to getting a court-martial. They wanted to because he left his post. You know, he left his ship to go for that. But as it worked out, he got the Bronze Star instead. So that part worked out. I have some of the information here written by the two fellows that I've been in contact with that were in the whaleboat that night. This is a commendation for Ron Tolgren, and it was given to Ron and the other 5 members, or 6 members of the whaleboat that were out there that night. It's from the United States Pacific Fleet Commander, 7th Fleet. The Commander of the 7th Fleet takes
pleasure in commending Seaman Ronald Morris Tolgren, United States Navy, for service set forth in the following citation. For meritorious service as a member of a lifeboat rescue party on the USS Renshaw during combat operations against an enemy, North Korea, and Chinese Communist forces in the Korean Theater, 26 December 1952. Tolgren participated in the rescue of plane crash survivors in North Korean waters. As a signalman of the lifeboat crew, he quickly and courageously manned the boat and assisted in lowering and launching the boat under extreme hazardous conditions of strong winds, high swells, and rough seas. Upon clearing the side and with the lifeboat violently pitching, rolling, and occasionally shipping water, he maintained effective communication with the ship and valiantly assisted in hauling aboard the lifeboat 3 of the plane crash victims and the boat officer, who had entered the water to assist an injured survivor. Despite the bitter cold, 34-degree winds, and breaking seas, he repeatedly leaned dangerously over the gunwales of the lifeboat in hauling men to safety. His skill and courageous conduct with disregard to his own safety materially aided in recovering a total of 5 men of the plane crew. His actions and steadfast devotion to duty were in keeping with the highest tradition of United States naval service. The commendation ribbon with Combat Distinguished Service is authorized. J.J. Clark, Vice Admiral, U.S. Navy, Commander, 7th Fleet.
All of the records show that I have, the official records that they brought in. Well, they pulled actually 4 of us in alive, and 1 they brought in who's already drowned aboard that boat, and there wasn't anybody washed aboard the ship or some of these other stories that I've seen. It's well authenticated that that's what happened. I went into the squadron in May of '52. We probably, there was 2 or 3 of them that were there from the previous deployment, and then we picked up about 4 or 5 new members. But George Haig was the plane captain. Plane captain was actually in charge of the crew, of the enlisted crew. Okay.
Wasn't Anderson?
Well, Anderson was in charge of Haig. Okay. You know, and as the 3 officers, of course. Then the rest were enlisted men, and the plane's captain, who's responsible for all of the different crew and all the things, the ordnancemen, the radio and electronics, and all of that, and the flight engineer. He was, in fact, he was the last. He came up and looked at the panel with me, and the pilot was trying to do everything he could to get the power going, and I was too. And he looked at it, and so he took off, ran back to start
You had
telling people.
You had emergency generators to, is that where you couldn't go in, or what?
Well, yeah, we were having trouble with that. They had what they call APU, auxiliary power unit in the back there, but we never got that started. It wasn't running right. So, but he ran back to get the crew up because we had lost communications with our electrical power out, and so I don't know. He did everything he could back there, and that's the only other story I know besides your dad being up there next to me there. So, and McKinney, when I talked with Ron Taldern from the whaleboat and things, the people that actually pulled them in, and they did, as they say, pulled all four of them in. And one of them, he said, it was really bad, cut, sliced, almost scalped in the front, and which McKinney was. He had a really nice scar, and his head was laid back there. And that's the way it was when he was pulled aboard the whaleboat. This is up here is where the pilot and the co-pilot sit. Back here we had a radioman.
In the radio room sits the 12 boat's chief of ordnance, Clinton Duke Macklin, possibly writing a letter home.
Back here is the navigator table where Lieutenant Bancroft was. This is the flight panel back in here. This is where I was sitting. .250 caliber machine guns here. 250 caliber machine guns on the top turret. 250 caliber machine guns on the tail section, and then in this aft section here, it opened up and it had two free-mounted 50 caliber machine guns.
Can you point to where you believe the aircraft came apart after the crash?
I think it probably right through here, right where I'm sitting, right around where.
And this is where you probably made it up.
Yeah.
What'd they call that area, huh?
That was it was a flight engineer station right here.
Yeah, what'd they call it though when you, the tomb or the
Oh, the flying
coffin?
boat, the flying coffin.
Crew members would often refer to the engineer station as the coffin because in an emergency a rapid escape was not possible.
There was bomb bays over on this side here. We carried our sonar bellies and depth charges and bombs. The one on this side doesn't show. We even had a galley down here. This is a stove. I don't know if you can see this or not. And we had a cook, Duke Macklin. He did our cooking for us. And back here where the bunks were the crew that wasn't on station were able to get some sleep. And this right here is the auxiliary power unit that we couldn't get started. That gave us the power, the auxiliary emergency power, supposed to.
So there was 4 survivors. Where were they at the time?
Well, McKinney was in the co-pilot seat over here. I was right here. And I don't know where the other two were.
Okay. What was their role? Where would they normally be?
Well,
Or were they sleeping at the time?
Stapleton, I think he was in the back. He was my backup for the flight, and he was also one of the gunners.
Mm-hmm.
And Max Studer, I don't remember, but he may have been up at the radio station. He was an electronics technician, but he wasn't on the flight deck at that time.
Okay.
I think he was off duty. I think that's why I don't know where those two were.
Okay.
I think they were both off. So.
And the rest of the group was probably sleeping, or?
Yeah, would assume so.
In your opinion, what would you say the biggest fault of those aircraft were?
Well, their age, for one thing. I don't know, they were, they'd seen a lot of flying time. They may have been underpowered, although they had 2 R2800 Pratt & Whitney engines on it, which is an upgrade from the original engines they had on there, which were 2600s, I think. But they flew, and it was marginal from time to time. It wasn't easy to get off the water. They were capable of carrying so much and so many so much crew and bombs and whatever, that it made it hard to fly them sometimes. They just
Was it plane 12 that crashed twice? You said the first time you crashed once before?
no, we never crashed.
Well, I mean,
We lost an engine and lost a lot of altitude, but we were able to, through the aft section back in here, the crew threw out everything we owned, all of our food, all of our ammunition, and we dropped our bombs. And
where are the depth charges on here?
Well, they don't show in here, but there's bomb bays right underneath the engine, right here. Underneath there's a bomb bay on this side and on this side, and this is where we carry our bombs and our depth charges, sonar buoys. And so we were able to throw those out and maintain enough altitude to get back to base. So they will fly on two, or on one, but not from 1,500 feet high, 1,000 to 1,500 feet.
When you left Iwakuni, where did you go, and when did you leave, and then when did
Well, we left about 8 o'clock at night.
the 26th?
Yeah, the 26th. Iwakuni is way down below here. It's in southern Honshu, but we would fly up through here and up along the coast. And the Task Force 77 was usually in this area in here. Mm-hmm. And in fact, the destroyer that picked us up had been up to Wonsan, Korea, and in these areas, and taken a lot of shells and things from the North Koreans. And so this is where we were flying. On up in here is Siberia, and that's where we were to go afterwards, after we were through with Task Force 77, and fly a weather reconnaissance up here, and then fly straight back down to Okama, Japan.
Is this the actual aircraft?
Yeah, that was taken about 3 days before.
It has
That's the only thing that we.
on the side of the plane. It has the names.
Yeah, your dad's name is right up here. You can't really read it, but I know it was there. And then McKinney was underneath there. This little emblem over here on the side.
Yeah.
It's actually what it is a flying outhouse. That's not what we called it, but it had been painted over, and discovered that when we were in Alameda, and I know I spent quite a bit of time, and some others took time to get the blue paint off of it, and so we had our insignia back. I don't know how it got painted, but it was
So
Benjo's Manor is what it was called.
You don't know when it was put on there?
No, it was probably during World War II. Well, this is a seaplane tender, and they would bring them aboard and do their maintenance and everything on the seaplane tender. Let's see, I think the year before, one or two of the flights before they were, when they were overseas, they were tended by a seaplane tender.
You said these planes were not well maintained because.
No, well, we hope they were well maintained, and I know the commander of the squadron had quite a few complaints about getting materials and repair parts and those kinds of things for it.
These boats that they would go from different harbors and.
Yeah, yeah, they could be most any place, but this is a 7 boat. It is Baker Able, which is VP-47. So this was probably 2 years before.
Baker Able. What was 48?
SF, I think.
SF. I think SF is what's in the video.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you were called. Your call name was Seashell.
I couldn't tell you. I don't remember.
Okay.
Seashell?
That's what I heard.
I don't remember. Well, I didn't have the outside communication.
Okay.
I had all the inside communication, and maybe it was. I probably could have been. It was something. We know that.
Beverly, do you remember what was happening here after you were notified of the accident that Christmas in 1952?
Well, different people, like the captain's wife called, or I called her, I don't know which one, but we got in contact with each other, and she said that her husband had been killed. And she was so happy that my husband was all right and everything. And kind of going through all of this, there was another boy from Fowler, which is a small town around here, and he had only been in the squadron a month, and he was killed. And I was a friend of his girlfriend. And so we went, you know, had to go through the memorial service and all that, and it's just, you're grieving, so you're so happy, but you're so grieving. I mean, it's really kind of hard to explain. But yeah, remember the Western Union kid pedaling up to my front door, you know, with a telegram, and just different things like that. So.
Do you know my mother?
Pardon?
Do you know my mother?
No.
I think we met at a squadron party. That's where we met Dale Anderson and his wife, and I'm pretty sure we met. If she was there, I know we did. I remember seeing Wayne there, and that's why I asked you if she was living at the time.
The same night that Joe was in the accident, I had this dream, and I dreamed about him. I don't know what he was doing, but he was fighting around in this dream. And so the next morning, I get up and I go to work, and I tell my boss that I had this dream about my husband, about Joe. And she says, oh, well, you know, people have dreams. I'm sure he's all right. And so I just have thought about that all these years. And if I hadn't gone to work to tell my boss, I wouldn't feel like I could tell this story with any authenticity, or whatever you want to call it. So
My mother dreamt three nights in a row that a female was taken. My father was running to another female.
isn't that
3
strange?
nights in a row.
I've had these calls in the past from other people that surprise me, and it's just something that I think, oh my God, a voice from the past practically, and I don't know. You sound like your father, and you look like your father, and it's like reliving some of those things. But I was happy that you got a hold of me, and.
And I don't know if you know any of them. I know you know my father, which is the both of these.
Yeah,
but
probably only him.
if you could identify any of those, that would be. I would like, that'd be great to know. If you're not,
Yeah, I probably not.
and then
We
there's.
didn't associate with the
Well, not
opposition.
too much, and we flew different times. We had, of course, 12 planes. We had 13 planes, actually. But flew different times and different schedules, and slept at different times. So, other than some of the crew that I trained with, I didn't really know the other pilots.
So you knew my father. You only knew my father for a fairly short period of time.
Yeah. Well, about 6-7 months.
Yeah. What did you think of my father? I mean,
Oh, he was a neat guy. I liked him. He was. Well, enlisted people. I was 19 years old.
Yeah.
And officers.
And my father would have been about. He was born in 25.
Oh, he was born in 25. Okay.
Yeah,
I didn't
so-
see this. So he was 8 years older than.